Theo, how was your night last night? I kind of got off to a rough start.
Yeah, you got off to a really rough start.
Did you guys see my entrance last night?
It's Len's job. He's the first one introduced last night in here. He's setting the tone for the entire 2019 season. And he almost breaks his neck. Good start, Len.
Thank you. But I was told that I was one-upped a little later on. Does anyone at the Dempster
I got to share this. For those of you who weren't at the Dempster thing, we're in this room on this stage. Ryan invites me and Jed up to do a little interview. And I had a big lunch, and I was kind of running late, so I grabbed a suit. It happened to be a suit from a few years ago. So I was feeling a little tight, nothing too bad. We're sitting up here, packed ballroom, just like this, doing the interview. I think it's going great. We're having fun. About 10 minutes in, Jason Hayward comes from off stage and starts walking over to me, and I'm thinking, this must be a planned bit or something. Ryan set something up for us. And Jay Hay comes over to me, and he whispers in my ear, and he says, "Hey, look down at your bottom button." So I'm sitting like this, and I look down, and they had given me a wireless mic that they run through my shirt. My bottom two buttons were wide open. The winter fat that I put on, it wasn't the suit's fault, let's put it that way, was hanging over. And I look over at our players, and they're all laughing at me. And I find out later on that the TVs had zoomed in on it. So I instead of riding on my ran home, jogged, and then I took the stairs up to this level this morning, so I should be okay. But I'm counting on you guys. If you see anything down here you're not supposed to see, you're gonna let me know. Please.
Well, I guess on that note, I'll just let you have the floor. And Theo and I talked before. He wants to take as many questions as possible here in this hour. This is your chance to ask Theo whatever's on your mind. So, Theo, you can start. Go in any direction you want, and then we'll get to the fans' questions.
Yeah, no, I really am just eager to take all your questions. I don't have an opening statement or anything like that, other than to say, obviously we pay attention to what's going on out there and how our fans are feeling, and it's been a bit of an odd feeling because on one hand, we're coming off 95 wins, and objectively that's a really great season. On the other hand, we all lived through the end of last season and how painful that was, and we know we fell short, and we let you guys down, we let ourselves down, and that feeling of not living up to your own standards or your own expectations is a difficult one. So we are, I just assure you, extraordinarily determined, every single person in the organization, to make it right and to make up for what happened at the end of last season. That's a personal feeling. If you could have seen the looks on the players' faces coming off the field after that wild card game, and then you could have heard the conversations we had, and if you can sense the accountability that everyone in the organization, me, our front office, the coaching staff, the players, that we all feel for our role and what went wrong, and then the adjustments that we're making, and the urgency with which we're going to go out and make this right next year. I think you'd feel a little bit better about things too. But you have questions. I think a lot of times they're legitimate questions, especially because we don't interact that much in the off season. It's not a game to play. We can't go out there and hustle and win a ball game for you and show you how much we care. So I wanted to do this panel just solo today so we can get to as many questions as possible. I'll stay as long as you guys want. The fact that you have questions and concerns just shows me that you care and you're passionate and you care about the Cubs and winning as much as we do. We love that feeling of being on top, just like we do, and we all want to stay there together. So I look forward to the session with you guys.
First of all, I just want to state straight on off, I know this is not your responsibility. Very disappointed that the Ricketts family did not have their forum this year. Just think it would have been a good idea.
I appreciate that. I understand the optics, but I will say, in their defense, That decision was made months and months ago, based on feedback from previous panels. But I hear you, and I will say Tom he's got to be the most successful owner in baseball. And this guy literally walks through the stands every single game, talking to fans, answering questions, giving up baseball. So I know how that looks, but I want you to try to remember that, and I will, any questions that you have for Tom or for me in this area, I will talk to him about that, and I'm sure he will be in contact with you guys throughout the rest of the winter and spring training, because that's who he is, and that's who that family is.
Now, I also want to say, Len Kasper, you do a great job. One thing
Whoa, Theo, your thoughts. This is for Theo, not for me.
There was this one game against Milwaukee in the fourth inning, and I was listening. I couldn't tell what was going on.
What's my
You
next
are the best.
interview?
You are the best.
Okay, just
Yes.
real shortly, the one thing I want to know is, can they do a better job this year of making decisions about weather? Because we had a situation last April, we had a game that, quite honestly, should not have been played. And we had several other times where it got very confusing about what was going on and so forth. And I just think that they need to use common sense.
That's a great question. Sometimes people ask me what's the hardest part of working in baseball, and I always say the rain. It is so hard. We joke around. There's a number of people involved, maybe half a dozen people, trying to make those kinds of decisions, factoring in the integrity of the game and logistics, and of course the fans and their experience. And we used to call it the brain trust. And we've had so many difficult outcomes that now we call it the rain trust. And we do our best, but you're right. Like, there have been some questionable outcomes, and I think that's the nature of it. We got just as many bad outcomes when I was in Boston. The only time I got it right, I don't know why, is when I was working in San Diego.
Thanks. Yes.
Hello, Mr. Epstein. I would like to speak to you about leadership. You have created an incredible culture of leadership in the organization when it comes to accountability, responsibility, transparency, consciousness, and culture. I actually work for a leadership development company, a small cottage industry that does leadership training for corporate executives. And I enjoy watching you do what you do because there's so many people out there that don't and hire us to help them. I'd like to know if you come by your leadership naturally, or if you read resources on leadership development, if you follow anyone, Seth Green, Patrick Lencioni, any of the bigwigs in terms of leadership development, and if you plan to teach other people how you do this when you're done with baseball.
Thank you for that. It's far too kind. I appreciate it. I don't do any formal training or education when it comes to leadership. I think it came to me out of necessity, the part that I do well, and there are a lot of elements of leadership that I don't do well and I need to work on. But I was thrown in to a leadership role at age 28 because two other people turned down the job. I was named general manager of the Red Sox, and everyone who worked for me was older than me, including every player but one, and I had no idea what I was doing. I hadn't run anything in my life at that point, and maybe a lemonade stand that went out of business after about an hour and a half. So I just had to figure it out on the run and learn from my mistakes, but I needed to learn from the great people around me, and so because of that, I created a real flat culture, and I think because I needed help, I just, out of necessity, created a real inclusive environment where everyone felt connected to the boss and connected to the mission, and then I saw how well that worked, so I've tried to recreate that everywhere I've ever been. And then I got great advice. Kevin Towers was my mentor, always told me, when things are going well, kind of fade to the background, make sure you credit everybody else and lift up the people around you and the whole organization as a leader. And then when things aren't going well, try to be out front and take the responsibility and take the blame for things. And we ask that of our players it's called being accountable. It's what makes being a great teammate. And so I do try to do that. I don't always succeed, but that sets the tone for the whole organization. And I think just those simple leadership qualities of like connecting everybody to a common vision, having institutionalized empathy, where as a rule, everyone in the organization tries to put themselves in everyone else's shoes and understand how they're looking at the job, the company, their role in everything, feel connected, and then trying to deflect credit and take blame. Those are really the only parts of it I think I try to do well on a consistent basis. But thank you so much for that.
Well, everything you just said are hallmarks of excellent leadership, so keep doing what you're doing.
I appreciate it.
First of all, I just want to say sorry for at opening day. I kind of spilled my whole backpack over you. But thank you for your autograph anyway. And my question was, how did you feel going into the postseason? How far did you think you were going to go? What were your expectations?
That's a great question. Honestly, I think you guys follow the team so closely. We didn't play that poorly in September. I think we had a winning month. We were fighting through, and our guys did a great job fighting through 42 games in 43 days. And but we had some injuries. We had some things that weren't going well. Milwaukee was just playing so well. So on one hand, there was this sense of trust in how good we can be and how competitive our guys are and how they always come through in the biggest moments and how much they look forward to competing in October and on the big stage. And I'll take our guys against anybody any day of the week when it comes to stepping up in big moments. On the other hand, we were fighting an uphill battle in a lot of ways. We hadn't hit the entire second half. Our bullpen, which had done a great job keeping us afloat for so long, was pretty taxed, and we lost Stropey and a couple other guys. So I'd be lying if I said that was as confident as I've ever been going into October. Obviously, there was a wave of momentum that we were fighting against, but you just keep scrapping and you try to find answers. You try to find a way, knowing that once you get into the tournament or once you get past the wild card game, you have as good a chance as anybody. But it wasn't the type of momentum and we hadn't sort of built to be our best at that point. It was more survival, and we didn't ultimately survive. So that's how we were feeling, honestly.
Right over here.
Hi. So I know that there aren't a lot of women in management at the Cubs, and are you doing anything to promote that kind of thing? Or if so, what is it?
We are because there's no way we can be as good as we want to be unless we have women contributing. And we have a number of vice presidents at the Cubs who are women. On the baseball side, we actually have recently hired a young woman to be a scout. We also have a young woman, Ella Cahill, who's done a fantastic job in our scouting department, is now in our player development operation, who's on the rise. We have a young woman named Megan Jones, who started out as an executive assistant to me and to Jed, who was recently promoted to manager of baseball operations administration, and also recently got into Kellogg Business School and is going to be going at night. She's someone to keep an eye on with a great future in baseball operations. And I had a great role model in that regard. When I was with the Red Sox, one of the first people I met at the Red Sox was Raquel Ferreira, who at the time was an assistant in player development. And she was another, almost a mentor of mine, even though I was her boss technically. And she rose through the ranks, and she's vice president for the minor leagues with Boston Red Sox, and has had an incredible impact on that organization and all the great prospects who've come up, and has had as big a role as anybody in all the success they've had over there. So this is a great time to be a young woman entering baseball, because there's no ceiling whatsoever, as it should be.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to start out by saying my cat is named after you.
I'm allergic to cats, but don't tell him.
I won't let him know that. But anyway, I know you're a big Patriots fan, so I wanted to ask if you thought Tom Brady was the greatest quarterback of all time, and if so, have you ever watched Aaron Rodgers?
I think I recall watching Aaron Rodgers this year and watching Khalil Mack on top of him.
Did you watch Week 1 or not?
I don't know, Week 1 I cut that off at halftime. What happened?
You should rewatch it.
No, I do think it's incontrovertible at this point that Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time, and he what a great work ethic. I mean, we're just about the same age, and I got my gut popping out of my shirt, and he's out there eating avocado ice cream and dominating every Sunday. So he's somebody we can all look up to.
Thanks, Theo.
Thanks a lot, Theo. So this goes back to your opening remarks and the question about leadership earlier. Let's take us back to the mood of the organization, right? I went to game 162, 163, and the wild card game, and I live in Madison. That was a special type of awful, right? I can only imagine what was going through your mind, the organization's mind at that time. Okay, now flash forward to the last couple of months. How do you focus as a leader the organization after a disappointment like that? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, okay, from your perspective, what is that number one objective that you set for the organization this year? And be a little more granular than win the World Series.
Absolutely. Okay. Great question. So I'll take you back to that last night again. We'll just skip it because you're right. It was like a slow motion car crash.
It was awful.
Those last 3 games.
Yeah.
And so we lose against the Rockies, and players come in the clubhouse. We're all down there. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of shock. I think shock that the season's over and the finality of it all, and that we're not going to have an opportunity for that great October run that the players
Against
worked so hard
Milwaukee,
for.
right?
Yeah, that they've almost come to expect, because we had been in 3 straight CSs. There was incredible disappointment when you fall 1 game short, and we really fell 1 base hit short. I think there's a sense of that's personal, because every one of us and every single player, everyone in the organization, there's something we could have done differently to be 90 feet better over the course of the season and get us to where we thought we should have been. And then there's great frustration at just failing to live up to your own standards and your own expectations, as I said earlier. So real raw emotion, lots of people, not lots of people, a few people crying, but everybody upset. And then you go home and you decide, well, okay, what are we going to do about this? And how can you capture this moment in time, this raw emotion, and turn it into motivation, and not just saying, okay, well, I assume when we all show up in Mesa in the spring, we're going to be super motivated because we had a bad end to the season. So we started with exit interviews, and Jed and I were there for like 4 or 5 days in a row, talking in depth and honestly with every single player and every single coach. And it was the most honest and the most introspective and the most reflective that our players have been about their own performance, about things that we can do differently as a team to try to get better. Because when you fall 90 feet short, when you don't get where you want to be, you can be that open. You can see things you couldn't see otherwise. I always say winning is a great deodorant because it covers everything up. When you're winning 97 games a year, or you're going to the championship series, or you're getting to the World Series, you're not going to look with as great a microscope as you otherwise would at some things that need to be a little bit better. So in talking to the players and talking to the coaches, we were brutally honest. And I think the entire organization, I touched on this a little bit earlier in my opening remark, but I think all of us individually and collectively as an organization, we're following this continuum from what happened at the end of the season to where we want to be in 2019, which starts with honesty, right? We're not going to paper it over and say, hey, that was 95 wins, that was a great season. It wasn't. We failed at the end. We had 2 teams celebrate on our field. As you said, it was awful at the end. So we own that. and then move from honesty to accountability. Okay, I'm part of that. It wasn't someone else's fault. There were a lot of things I could have done differently to have written a different outcome. Every player, there's something that they could have done over the course of 6 months of the season to help us be one game better. And so the exit interviews and then following, I've spent more time talking to players this offseason in person and over the phone than I ever have. There's been a ton of work behind the scenes, which some of which is not appropriate to go into, but trust me, it's happening. And everyone in the organization was honest, either with themselves or from me or from somebody else, and has taken accountability for what happened. And then you have to act on it and make adjustments. So when you're honest and you take accountability for our collective performance or individually, yeah, I have a hole in my swing. I have a certain part of the zone I can't cover. There are things that I can do differently. The league has adjusted to me. It's on me to adjust back. And now we're talking about it at the beginning of the offseason, so I have all offseason to work on it and to make adjustments. Just as we're making adjustments in baseball operations and trying to make sure we have the best processes in place so we can make good decisions going forward. We're all making adjustments. And then you move into the execution stage when the season starts, and that has to come with urgency. Urgency is the opposite of complacency. And I don't think we've been overly complacent or anything, but if we're being honest with ourselves and taking accountability for it, we do need to make a little bit of an adjustment, and from day one of the season, play with more urgency, because this is a really competitive division. And what an awful feeling that was at the end of last year. Juxtapose that with the feeling that we all had after 2016, the World Series. What a wide swing. So if we want to feel completely proud of ourselves and of each other and everything going on in this franchise, then it's not enough to be honest, it's not enough to be accountable, it's not enough to make adjustments. We have to come out collectively as an organization and assert ourselves and play with a real sense of urgency from day one. That's exactly what we plan on doing. So that's what we try to do, is take that raw emotion and motivation, have a process with each player, with each coach, with everyone in the organization, myself included, and channel it so that it's not just extra motivation, but actual positive adjustments, positive change, and then come out and have a great, urgent season next year.
Thank you very much. You're going to go down in history as being one of the best leaders, not in baseball, but overall. Thank you.
We'll see about that. Thank you very much for the question.
Yes, I, along with everybody else in this room, appreciates all you've done and are doing for the Cubs. And I can't imagine your job's got to be 24/7. How do you shut that off and balance your work with your home and your family life? How do you do that? I have a second part to that, but that one first.
Sure. Yeah, and you answered it with family. I mean, it's I'm so lucky to have a great wife at home and two wonderful sons, 11 years old and 4 years old, and the 11-year-old is playing a ton of sports, and that's what's fun for me is to get home and play with my kids and go to their sporting events, put a hat on and blend in and be a little league dad, one that doesn't yell at the umpires or the coach or the other team or my own son. I do pull that part off well. And that's a great outlet, and fantasy football and following other sports and things of that nature are a great release too. And then picking up a guitar after a tough loss and being way worse at guitar than we've ever been at our worst moment at baseball helps too. It helps keep me grounded.
So the second part to that is, and you mentioned it in the previous one, this game is so competitive and the teams our division's good. How do we, as an organization, stay ahead of everybody else? What are some things you're trying to do to make sure we're kind of a step ahead or on the, how do you do that? Or what are we doing?
Yeah, it is. It's an extraordinarily competitive landscape out there, and I think it kind of can take that question two different ways. One is just broadly, how hard it is to find competitive advantages these days, and it's so much different than it was 15 years ago. 15, 20 years ago, you could take a basic insight about the game through analytics, and then maybe no one else was working to apply it, or no one else was applying it on the field quite as effectively as you were, and you could see that real competitive advantage, and it played out on the field and helped separate you, or maybe you had you've done a lot of work, hired some great scouts, ran some great analytics in the draft, and you knew this one area of the draft you could keep exploiting a competitive advantage and fill your farm system that way, or you could manipulate certain holes in the collective bargaining agreement, put yourself in position to acquire more young talent than anyone else. And these days, the game has changed so much. It's the flattest competitive landscape I've ever seen. It's virtually impossible to find something unique and proprietary that you're doing that no one else has, even though we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and all our man hours trying to find it. And when we do find something that we can do that gives us an advantage over everyone else, that's different. And that's, and for every 100 things we try, 99 of them probably don't work, but one we get a little insight into how to evaluate players better, or how to position them on the field a little bit better, or different ways to do things in the course of a game. You might have it for half a season, and then all the other 29 teams, they have so much data these days, they reverse engineer it, they figure it out, and then they apply it too. So it's just such a tough landscape. So we've just poured a ton of resources into R&D. We've made a few key hirings this offseason to try to make up for some areas where we slipped and try to get ahead of the Joneses. But it's a tough landscape. And then in the division, with how tough that is, I mean, there's just no question that we need to be the best version of ourselves from game 1 through game 162 in order to win the division next year. That touches on everything I just spoke about, which is, individually and collectively, there has to be a sense of urgency. We can leave absolutely nothing undone. We have to all set up our lives to dedicate every bit of what we have to this organization moving forward. You don't get a second chance at this. This is a special time. We're in the middle of a great window with this great core of players that we have. So we have to be able to look ourselves in the mirror at the end of the year and say we did everything that we can possibly do to win this division. Because if not, we're not going to be where we want to get at the end of the year.
Thank you.
Hey Theo, so I just wanted to check in real quick. I don't know if you remember me. I'm Zorian Schiffman from Elmhurst, Illinois. My first Cubs convention was 2016. I came here and asked you a question. I was only 15 back then. I said, how do I want to be a front office executive in baseball? How do I do it basically? And I actually got the great chance to talk to you a little bit after while you were signing some autographs, and you said, get involved and never lose your passion for baseball, no matter how old you get or where you go. And since then, I got involved in my high school team, got some internships. Now I'm actually a student manager, and I'm having a blast at Miami, Ohio University with their baseball team. So I wanted to thank you once again. I'm indescribably grateful for the advice that you gave me. So thank you very much for that. So my question is actually not specifically about the Cubs, but just about baseball in general. Over the last 2 years, I'm sure many people have noticed there's kind of been a lack of movement and speed in the offseason in terms of free agency, not as much going on at the winter meetings. And over that same 2 years, there's also been an increase of reporting in the media, more based on speculation versus information. I think that a lot of times the media, they treat baseball players like they're commodities, but they don't realize that these are human beings. They're not, don't get me wrong, I hate the St. Louis Cardinals with a burning passion, but I do think that how they handled the situation with Stephen Piscotty, it was last year, a couple years ago, I thought that was a really classy move, and I think that more organizations, that's kind of a good role model for that. But when as baseball fans and baseball lovers, we do hate to see elite players like Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, AJ Pollock, Dallas Keuchel, that just a few weeks removed from the start of spring training still do not have their contracts because signing a contract is they have families. It is it does affect their entire lives. So when you look at on the business side of baseball, the media did they were setting unrealistic expectations, talking about $500 million contracts for Harper Machado.
I think I got the nature of your question. I just want to make sure everyone else gets a chance. So first of all, keep it up. Great job with setting yourself up for a career in baseball. And then I'll try to answer that question as best I can, and we'll move on to somebody else. Thank you. There's no doubt there's been a slowing down of the off-season. The entire calendar has sort of shifted deeper. You used to set the groundwork for deals and free agent signings and GM meetings, and execute them either before, during, or right after the winter meetings. And it almost seems like everything has shifted back 4 to 6 weeks. I think there are a number of factors that contribute to that. One is this is kind of a new breed of GMs in the game now, is with sort of different backgrounds and different ways of looking at the game, a little bit more analytical, and I think they're placing a greater value on sort of every dollar and every decision, and wanting to find value in every transaction, as opposed to, and I can speak firsthand from this, as opposed to the way it was 15 years ago or so, where it was teams were more out just interested in like filling holes and addressing holes and didn't care quite as much about value, and there weren't as many methods to discern exactly how much impact you were getting for each dollar. Now you can quantify it a lot more, so it's just kind of, it's made the whole process a little bit more methodical, I'd say. And there's no doubt it's tough on players. And look, players are paid a great wage to play a game for a living, and they're grateful for that. There is another side to it, as you mentioned. They're human beings, and it's hard to get to free agency. You have to train and play your whole career. You have to be one of the lucky few to get 6 years in, and you might only get one crack at it to set up your family. And when the market's not there as immediately as you expect it can be, and then you're getting closer to spring training, and maybe you have a few kids, maybe a pregnant wife at home, and they're wondering, where are we going to live? What's our home going to be? Who are our teammates going to be? It can be difficult. And then there's a vacuum created when there's not a lot of moves. There's not a lot of information. The media is used to writing about big trades, big free agent signings. When that's not there, they have a job to do too. I don't think they're like speculating wildly, but they're trying to piece things together with the few smoke signals there are. Sometimes they can be accurate. Other times that type of speculation isn't as accurate, and then that makes it even tougher on the players and the organization. So yeah, I think the off seasons probably ran a little more smoothly 10 years ago. But I think with the new collective bargaining agreement in a few years, and with the feeling out period between players and agents, and sort of new baseball economy, I think we'll get back to having a more orderly, more entertaining off season for players, for media, and for front offices too.
Thank you.
I have 2 questions. The first one is, since this is Joe Madden's last year of contract, do you plan on bringing him back next year?
Hey! There you go.
Great question. I sure hope so. And Joe's been a instrumental, fundamental, essential part of the success that's happened here. But for Joe and the way he handled our young players in 2015 and 2016, there's no way we would have won a World Series. And there's no, if you think about it, I think we kind of take it for granted because we had this 5-year plan, and our scouts did a great job of bringing in talent. Our player development guys did an unbelievable job instituting a Cubs way and bringing them up through the system. And our core young players are so talented and such great guys. That doesn't automatically lead to winning and to winning a World Series. There's usually this 3, 4, 5-year adjustment period for young players when they come up to the big leagues. That's why most rebuilds don't work. But Joe got here just at the exact perfect moment in time, and he's so special at getting players to relax, to be themselves, to have fun, to prioritize winning, and just to take a deep breath, and allowing their true personalities and their true talents to take over. And that was the biggest reason why all these crazy things happened. Like Addison Russell came up at age 21 and took over shortstop in the middle of a pennant race. Chris Bryant had like a 1-game adjustment period to the big leagues. Wilson Contreras made his debut in the summer of 2016 and was catching Game 7 of the World Series a few months later, and so on and so on. All these, Kyle Schwarber coming up in the middle of the year, playing such a big role. That just doesn't happen. And without Joe and the environment that he creates, that wouldn't have happened. And now we're at a point where we're at a different phase as an organization. As I said earlier, we're all making adjustments. And the great thing about Joe is that, even though he's a little bit older than me, he's never standing still. He's never satisfied. He's a creative person. I think he's an adaptable person. He's someone who likes a challenge, and someone who is going to bring great energy to solving any problem. So he's so fired up about next season and trying to make some of those adjustments and change the tone around the team and create a little sense of urgency. That my bet is that it goes extraordinarily well with Joe and with the whole group, and that he's here for a long time to come.
Thanks for the question. Respectfully, we've been trying to make this as we can. And hopefully your second question will be asked, but I just want to make sure we're running out of time here. If we can keep it short and to one question. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, Theo, going back to your introduction about you're willing to pass along things to Tom, I realize this isn't your responsibility. Most of us realize there are budgets, there are constraints. It's a business at the end of the day. The frustration, I think, isn't that you're not signing a big-name free agent. It's when I read articles that the Cubs need to clear money to sign a middle reliever, I think that that's where people are getting frustrated.
Yeah, the thing about, and I appreciate the question. I'll try to keep my answers short so that we can't get to more questions. I have a hard time doing that, though. I always speak too long. Every team tries to enter every offseason as nimble as possible, with as much payroll flexibility as possible, with as many tradable assets as possible, with a lot of players coming off good years, career years, so they have value on the market, maybe even value that exceeds their actual value. You want to have as many contracts that are as movable as possible, so you can clear room, you can be creative. And there are off seasons when we've done that, where we've been the team with the most flexibility, the most nimble going into each winter, and that's usually a sign of good strategy, good decision making, good fortune, good long-term planning. And those are usually that set of circumstances leads to winners where we can be really active and we can be aggressive and we bring in a lot of really good players and we get a lot of praise for that. And we've had that more often than not, the last 4 or 5 years. That's not our situation this winter, and when we do our jobs really artfully, you never notice the budget, right? Because we've created a lot of flexibility, we have a lot of movable pieces, we can get everything done that we want to get done. But when we haven't done our jobs, and I haven't done my job as artfully or haven't gotten the outcomes that we expect enough, we're going to be in a situation that's not as flexible. And so we can't always be as aggressive, and we can't always get everything that we want. But the way the budget's being treated this year is no different than how it's been treated in the past. The great thing about the Ricketts is it's a family and a family business, but of course it's a business. All 30 teams are businesses, and I don't go over budget. I can't go over budget. That's the way it works. You've never noticed that in the past because we've done, I think, a pretty darn good job of creating that flexibility so we can be aggressive. We haven't put ourselves in that position at this moment in time, and so we're having to fight through those obstacles. We're not going to get everything that we want, but it doesn't mean it's going to be that way forever. It doesn't mean we don't have a darn good team, and it doesn't mean you can't find solutions in unexpected places that are going to be extremely impactful and help us get where we need to go for next year. So I appreciate the question. I hope that was
Hi, I wanted to ask, what was the hardest part in the rebuild?
Great question. I think the hardest part of the rebuild. What was the hardest part of the rebuild? Yeah, I think of what I touched on earlier, that conversion to actually winning major league games and trying to take full advantage of the talent that you have. The probably the easiest part, because you guys were so good to us and we were transparent with you and you were so good to us about focusing on the draft and being excited about our young players and giving us some room to breathe in the big leagues as we turned over and brought in a whole new slew of young talent. That was the fun and easy part. Is we were so single-minded about acquiring young talent. Every good player we had towards the end of his contract, we knew we were trading him. Whether and bringing young talent back. Every one-year deal we signed as a free agent, we knew if we could make some adjustments and coach him up and put him in good position, we could then take a Scott Feldman and trade him and bring in a guy with a great young arm. Maybe sometimes he turns into a guy like Jake Arrieta. More often than not, they don't. But that's fun, and we were so focused on it. It's much more difficult and much more complicated to have those parts synthesized at the big league level and over 162 dominate your competition and then have that kind of success in October. So that's why everyone talks about, it was a great 5-year plan. In the 5th year, you won a World Series. That was just good fortune. We didn't plan it out that way. We wanted to after 5 years to get to a point where we were competing for World Series year after year. And I am proud of 4 straight years in the postseason, but having it all come together with Joe and the coaches and our players just happen to be the types of guys who played best at the most important times. That was the most difficult part. But thank you guys for sticking with us through those tough times. I know how special it is to watch and enjoy October baseball and to be on top. And I want to assure you we're going to work so hard so we can stay up there.
Hi, I just wanted to ask real quick. It seems like a lot of the more small market teams are focusing more on defense. So, for example, like the shift and things like that. It looks like there's a bit of a correlation between that and opponent at-bats or plate appearances. I was just wondering, as general manager or president of baseball operations of a large market team, are you going to try and focus more on defense in the upcoming years, kind of to go with the rest of sort of where the high analytical small market teams are going?
Yeah, great question. I think we try to take the approach, even though we're a bigger market team, that we want to find value and find competitive advantages in every margin and under every stone, and leave no stone unturned. And so we don't look at it like we have to catch up to small markets or anything like that. I actually think specifically with defense and defensive positioning, that's been a great strength of ours. Our opponent's batting average on balls in play, or our defensive efficiency, has been on a whole over the last 4 years or so the best in baseball. In 2016, it was, I think, the best of all time. It was, or at least the best since 1945, so it was historically great. So I think that's something that our coaching staff does a phenomenal job with. We built a proprietary software platform to synthesize all the myriad factors that go into where we expect the ball to be hit, not just because of the opposing hitter, but also because of who's pitching for us, also because of our game plan, how we're going to attack that hitter, also because of the game situation. And we don't do overshifts or dramatic shifting as much as every other team, but the results are as good, if not better, over a long period of time. Credit to the defenders that we have, especially in the infield, and the positioning that we have. If we have infielders who aren't quite as athletic, you'll probably see us doing more overshifting and heading back in that direction. But we do shift every single pitch. It's just a little bit more subtle. We position, we think, optimally for every single pitch. That's the goal anyway, even if it's not as obvious with the overshifting on the other side of the bag.
Thank you.
Yeah, Theo, you honestly said at the end of the season that our offense was broken. And I know we got Descalso to replace the Stella, and I know we have a new hitting coach, but it at least appears like that's been the extent of trying to fix it. And I don't know whether we should get the big free agent or not, but I hope if we're not, it's not because of money, it's because you don't think it's what we need to make it to a World Series. So my question is, other than hoping that guys who had bad seasons last year have good seasons this year, what have we done to fix the offense, and are we poised to be a championship team this year?
Thanks for the question. And I know it's semantics, but I believe what I said is, and I was just being really honest, and I tried to be as transparent as possible. Plus, you guys saw the game, so I can't fool you. What I said was that in the second half, the offense broke. And there's a difference between something that broke and something that is permanently broken. Like, I don't, as I look at it today, I don't think our offense is broken or defective or something that is permanently damaged. I think we had a almost inexplicable change in performance in the second half of last year. If you look at the All-Star break, we were leading the league in, I think, runs scored, batting average, on-base percentage, OPS. We were up there among the league leaders in isolated slugging and slugging. We were hitting our share of home runs. We were getting on base. We were right up there in the league leaders with walks, all the important categories. And things wasn't perfect, but things were humming pretty well. And we were hitting the ball in the air enough and hitting a lot of line drives. The second half of the season, it's unbelievable. It's just like a mirror image. We stopped grinding at bats. We stopped walking. We were among the absolute trailers in the industry in walks, in home runs. We couldn't get the ball off the ground. We weren't hitting the ball hard. We weren't hitting it in the air. We weren't hitting for any power. So it was like the worst possible outcomes you could possibly get, and it was almost team-wide. It was systemic. And that's why I say that it broke, and it put such a strain on our pitching staff. We made the trade for Daniel Murphy in August. We got like a 10-day boost where we started to hit well, and then right back to the same old. So it broke, and our job is to fix it. So, yes, of course, any offense is going to get better and improve if you go out and sign one of the elite offensive players in the game. But for reasons I articulated earlier, we are not quite as nimble and as flexible as we need to be in order to make that happen this winter. Even if we could, or even if we did, I think the greater fix comes from getting the most out of the talent on the roster that we have. I mean, we have a number of hitters who did really impressive things in their early 20s in the major leagues. And we've always expected our lineup to be a monster by the time our players moved into their primes and in their mid-20s and late 20s. And if we're being honest, again, like, it hasn't fully happened the way we expected it to. I don't think this offense is fully realized. So, those adjustments that we're talking about, a new voice, Anthony Iapoce helped mold these guys when they were in the minor leagues. He was an unbelievable coach. He's back now. We're lucky enough to have him in the big leagues to continue to mentor these young hitters. And significant adjustments that certain hitters are having to make because the league has adjusted to them. I think you're going to see significant bounce back performance. You can't just count on everyone to bounce back because there's going to be a regression from other players. But if you look at it, I think all but 2 or 3 hitters in our lineup should, if you project it and you object about it, should be expected to perform significantly better than they did last season. So I think this offense is going to be a lot better next year than it was last year.
So my question is more on roster construction of more like pitching. I know that we've been signing and rehabbing pitchers and we're kind of trying to exploit that, but what kind do you see in a pitcher that you think, yeah, this is my guy, I'm going to go and get him, pitching prospect or even signing free agents?
I think we've done that to an extent too. We've our overriding philosophy and how to sort of perform this rebuild and build this organization has been to develop hitters and to acquire young hitters through the draft and through other means and bring them up through our system and break them in. And with pitching, it's to go get the pitching that you see that's pretty good. We did that with John Lester, for example, in free agency. We just last year, we made a trade for Cole Hamels mid-season. We felt like, hey, this guy, yes, you can call him a buy low because he was not pitching as well as his norms in Texas last year, but the body of work, this is a dude, and then again, taking a pretty significant step to pick up his option and bring him back this year. So in general, I think what we do is try to develop the hitting and acquire the pitching, whether it be through trade mid-season like with Hamels and Chavez last year, or an off-season signing like Lester and others. So I just think we have to do a better job. If you're taking that philosophy, you can't miss. If you miss in a given off-season on the pitching, there are going to be consequences, and we saw that last year. So I think we have to really be as precise as we possibly can with that strategy.
Thank you.
Oh, all right. As a data analytics guy in a different industry, I've been really fascinated with the past 10 to 15 years with the advancements in analytics in baseball. As you guys know, 8 of the 10 playoff teams last season were top 11 home runs. Cubs were 22nd. I know part of that was because of Bryant being less than 100%, missing half the season. But I have a direct quote ingrained in my brain from your end of season press conference. Launch angle is not a fad. With launch angle having positive correlation with home runs and you making that comment, I'm guessing it wasn't applied as you saw fit in 2018. My question is, has launch angle or any analytic advantage been difficult for your operations staff to communicate clearly in a way that players understand? And if not, what is your staff's plan to better communicate the message down to the players?
Yeah, hitting coaching in general is it's a really, really difficult, tricky endeavor. And I think you're seeing, we're in a period of great change in the industry when it comes to that. They're hitting coaches now with much different backgrounds, much different philosophies than you saw even 5 or 10 years ago. And I think it's an unanswered question, but I think 10 years from now, it might even be more like golf, where everyone has their own coach, everyone has their own swing coach the way it is in golf, because you're seeing players now in the off season go back home and use their gurus or flock to the to the expert who's fixed the latest guy or work with the best player. And so you're seeing that. So I think what you need in a really effective hitting coach now is somebody who really understands players, can make deep, trusting connections with players, and understands that everyone's different. You're not going to take one overriding philosophy and force it on any hitter. Anthony Iapoce is like the ultimate foxhole guy. Players love working with him; they trust him. But he's not a wallflower either. He's going to step in and be honest with guys and hold them accountable, but very flexible with the approach that he can teach. As far as how to incorporate, and I shouldn't have said launch angle at the end of your press conference, because that can be misinterpreted. You don't want guys going up there just looking to loft at the expense of everything else, but hitting the ball on a line in the air is a lot more effective than hitting the ball on the ground. Just like hitting the ball hard is a lot more effective than hitting the ball softly. So I think the way that the philosophy we're taking as an organization, especially with the big league team right now, because we do strike out too much and we have a hard time adjusting, against really good pitching. We've seen that over and over in Octobers and throughout the course of the season. Is before you get to 2 strikes, and when you're early in the count and you're aggressive and you should be hunting a pitch you can drive. You should be hunting a pitch you can hit hard. You should be hunting a pitch you can hit in the air. Go for it. Hit it in the seats where they can't catch it. When you get to 2 strikes, we collectively have to make an adjustment. Every single player we have, and they know this, I wouldn't say it to you unless we've said it to them directly, they need to have a 2-strike approach. They need to be adjustable. They need to have a B swing. They need to be able to survive with 2 strikes, like Anthony Rizzo does, as well as anybody in the game.
Yeah.
And so that's a specific challenge that some of our players, I said everyone's had adjustments that have been identified for them. They need to make and work on this winter. So for some of our hitters, it's, hey, you have tremendous power, you have tremendous opposite field power, you do a great job of hitting the ball hard and in the air. We don't want to take that away from you, but hunt that early in the count, hunt that before you get to 2 strikes. But you need to have a 2-strike approach that you can rely upon. So when there's a runner on third, less than 2 outs, we can get the ball in play. We can get that run in when it's a tie game and that go-ahead runs on second base. We'll take the bloop opposite field single, against a closer who, you can't be sitting up there trying to loft the ball into the seats against some of these relief pitchers we see when you get to 2 strikes. So it's about playing the game, understanding the count, understanding the situation, and being adjustable. But yeah, when you're aggressive early in the count, hitting the ball hard in the air is a pretty good philosophy.
Speaking of adjustments, all the buttons, good shape?
I think good.
All right.
No significant adjustments needed.
This hour flew by. Thank you so much. Big hand for Theo.